In this video, I'm going to be talking about the various comics that came out on April 10th, 2019. Every week, I read a whole bunch of comics, and then I break down the story for you, tell you my thoughts on each book, and give it a score out of 10. In the description of this video, I timestamp when I talk about each specific comic, so you can jump to whatever book you want to hear about. I also post all these individual reviews on my channel afterwards. Last week, I saw the movie Pet Sematary. I watched the original 1989 movie and then the 2019 remake. Watched them basically back to back, and I'm giving you my thoughts on that new movie, contrasting it with the old movie. Pretty interesting. Check that one out. Okay, let's start with my pick of the week this week, and that book is Wonder Twins #3, written by Mark Russell, art by Stephen Brine. So I feel bad because I've made issue 1 and 2 of Wonder Twins my pick of the week. I don't want to just keep picking it. I don't want to just keep giving Mark Russell the W, but I freaking love Wonder Twins. I mean, it is what it is. I want to feature other books up front and give them that win for pick of the week, but Wonder Twins just keeps impressing me every week. I just love it. I love it. It's so funny. So amusing. It's great. Okay, let's dive into the story in issue 3. So Zan, he is getting his pet monkey, which he ordered from the circus, and the monkey is called Sir Lance a Little. And we have a little flashback of this monkey when he was a circus performer, and he was forced to ride a tiny bicycle through a flaming hoop. And this cute monkey has like little PTSD about this whole situation. We jump over to Lex Luthor, and he is, in his big office building, and he's talking to one of his employees, this scientist called Philo Math. And Philo Math wants to quit, but Lex Luthor sort of has trapped him through a complicated contract and would basically take everything if this Philo quit. So Lex Luthor offers this Philo a job working for the League of Annoyance. For 2 years, he'll help this League of Annoyance out, and then I guess he'll be let out of his contract. So this Philo Math, this great scientist, agrees. So then we're at this League of Annoyance meeting, which I absolutely love this organization and their bureaucratic scenes where they're all sitting around their table and they're trying to discuss evil plans. So this Mind Scrambler, he has the ability to sort of switch bodies. He comes up with this plan and he's like, look guys, the President of the United States is coming to our town for a charity dinner, and if I get in there and I shake the president's hands, I can mind switch with him, and all of a sudden I'm the president of the United States, and we can get all sorts of stuff out of that. Honestly, this is a pretty good plan, pretty simple plan, but the gang, the League of Annoyance, is like, yeah, but we don't have $5,000 needed to attend this charity dinner, so they just like, hey, that plan's not gonna work. Couldn't come up with $5,000. So eventually this Philo Math, he creates these power dampening plastic bags, and they're going to put them over the Wonder Twins, and that's sort of going to dampen the powers, and the Wonder Twins won't be able to fight back. And the League of Annoyance, they want to go after the Wonder Twins because last issue, the Wonder Twins took down one of their own, this guy named Count Druncula, which was a really funny issue. So they want to get the revenge, and they decide to go attack the Wonder Twins. They're going to go attack them while they're sleeping, though. That way they won't put up as much of a fight. They manage to sort of kidnap these Wonder Twins, put them in their plastic bag, take them back to their base. They're going to throw them into this plastic shredder and kill them. But the monkey, Sir Lance a Little, he sort of saves the day. He overcomes his fear of like riding this tiny bicycle. He rides a tiny bicycle, manages to like knock out some of these League of Annoyance members. Wonder Twins escape from their plastic bags. They're attacking the League of Annoyance, and they manage to arrest some of the League of Annoyance members. And that is how this issue ends. And really, really fun stuff. Like, this is a really good time. I loved this monkey and some of the gags they had there. I loved the League of Annoyance and all their bureaucracy. This is just a really good time. Really great stuff. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. The next comic I'm going to talk about, rather than sticking with DC, I'm just going to do all the #1s up front. So let's talk about what new #1s came out this week. So the first #1 I'm looking at this week is Faithless, #1, written by Brian Azzarello, art by Maria Lovett. This one is from Boom Studios. So Brian Azzarello is a writer I'm kind of mixed on. Sometimes I really like his stuff, sometimes I don't. I read his 100 Bullets series, which went 100 issues, and I really loved it in the beginning. I thought it was so awesome. But then when we got near the end, it started to get a little bit convoluted a bit. He's also writing Batman Damned right now, which I'm loving the art in, but I find the story to be kind of weak. He also wrote Wonder Woman. It was a pretty well critically liked run. However, even in that series, while I enjoyed it, I also found it a little bit confusing at times. But I'm very interested to see this indie book of his and how it's going to be. It is very, very different than a lot of his other work. Like, you can't even really tell it's the typical Brian Azzarello style. And it's such a different story. So the tagline for this book is an erotic depiction of faith, sex, and the devil in the tradition of the Divine Comedy. So I really like the art style in this book. It's very different, very quirky, some very vibrant colors, pretty cool. I have to give a warning before we get into this issue, is that this book is pretty erotic. There's some nudity and there's some lesbian sex in here. So there's going to be some cartoon nudity in some of these pages. So just a forewarning there. So this girl, Faith, she's in this cafe, and she likes to dabble with magic. She has this little, like, notebook, and she draws symbols in it, and I guess they sort of maybe create magic out of these symbols or something. Her friends think it's cute, her little hobby. It's a little off-putting, but it's sort of part of this girl's charm. Eventually, this blue-haired girl walks into this cafe, and Faith accidentally spills some coffee on her. And she starts apologizing, offering to buy this girl more coffee. Eventually, they sort of start hanging out in this cafe. And as they leave the cafe, they run into the blue-haired girl's ex-boyfriend. And they have a little argument. The ex-boyfriend wants the blue-haired girl back. And she's like, I said I don't love you. I don't want anything to do with you. And that sort of little confrontation ends. Eventually, Faith and the blue-haired girl, they go to a bar to do some day drinking. And on the TV in the bar, we see that same ex-boyfriend. And he is like on the rooftop or on the balcony of this building high up. He's there and he jumps off and he kills himself. So he's dead. And then the blue-haired girl makes a joke. And Faith is a little taken aback by this because she literally just saw her ex-boyfriend kill himself, and she's already joking about it. So eventually they move past this, and Faith starts explaining her dabbling in magic, and the blue-haired girl thinks it's pretty cool. Eventually they wind up at the blue-haired girl's place, which she lives in a pretty nice loft. It's pretty big. And Faith asks to take a shower, and this is where we get erotic, people. The blue-haired girl then asks if she can join in on the shower. Then they start having sex. You know, the blue-haired girl's going down on the other girl. And one thing that's weird is that the blue-haired girl, she, at the last, like, ending of this book, she sort of turns into something. Like, I don't know what she's turning into here. A whole bunch of maggots or something? I don't really know what she turned into in the end here. And that's how this issue ends. Overall, I don't really know what to think about this issue. I liked the art style, and I'm kind of intrigued to see where Brian Azzarello goes with this. I'm not fully on board, but I'm definitely going to check out issue 2 and see where this plot goes from here. I'm going to give this issue a 7.5 out of 10. Next #1 I'm looking at is Orphan Age #1, written by Ted Anderson, art by Nuno Platti, and this one is from Aftershock Comics. So this story is pretty unique. It's very reminiscent of Y: The Last Man. In that book, we had this one guy and every other guy in the world died, and then only the women are alive. So one guy and all these women. And that series was really, really fun, really hooked me right away. One of the greatest comic series I've ever read. So great. And the way how it sort of reminds me of this book is that in this book, we have a world, and there was all these kids, and all the adults died. For some reason, we don't know why. So all the adults have died, and then all these kids have had to live in this world with no adults. And the book does a time jump 25 years later, and now all these kids are adults themselves and have their own kids. But, they never had adults to help them grow up. And all the adults would have all this knowledge, like how to run all this technology, how to keep the world moving. So some of these kids don't really have this knowledge, and sort of like this post-apocalyptic world. So in this story, in this book, we have these kids, and we jumped ahead 25 years, and we're seeing how these kids are going to forge their own world. And we're in this farm town, and it's very close-knit. Everybody knows each other. They even have this support group where they share their feelings, which is something that we obviously don't do as much today, but it's very common occurrence here. And we see in this support group, people are talking about the day all the adults died and what that was like for them. So we have this mayor of this farm town, Mayor Brian, and he has this little girl. And this little girl will come into play later. So there's this group, and they are called New Church, and they are like evil. And they blame the destruction of the old world on all the dead adults. And this New Church is coming to attack this farm town. And Mayor Brian and all the farm town people are sort of scrambling to maybe get out of town or figure out what they can do. And the New Church group, they show up, and the leader asks, who wants to join his army? No one does. So he starts murdering everybody in this town. And this Mayor Brian, he gets killed. He's killed now. But his daughter is saved by a friend of his and this other girl. And the three of them, they escape this town before these New Church members find them. So they escape this town, and they are sort of going to be on their way to some other place. And we're going to be following this storyline from here. So I thought this was pretty intriguing concept. I would have maybe liked to spend a little bit more time when the event first happened and we have all these kids and all the adults died. Maybe they're going to do flashbacks to that as the series continues. I would have liked to maybe establish more of the main characters before throwing this New Church group into the mix and having this New Church group kill everybody. But we're going to be following the little girl and these two other characters that saved her, and see where that goes from the future. So I'm mixed on it. It was interesting. I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. If the concept intrigues you, I think it's worth checking out. But I don't think it's as strong as Why the Last Man, or even like Walking Dead. Sort of has like a similar presence in this post-apocalyptic world. But yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Next comic I'm looking at is Star Wars, Age of the Republic, Grand Moff Tarkin. This one's written by Greg Pak, art by Mark Lamming. So I wasn't going to read this, but, I was looking at what came out this week, and it kind of intrigued me because I want to learn more about Grand Moff Tarkin. He was the guy in the original Star Wars movie that was sort of like one of the lead commanders on Darth Vader's like Death Star. And we don't know that much about that character, really. So I was very curious to learn more about his backstory, and that's what we get in this one-shot. So we see this Grand Moff Tarkin, and he starts off, and he's a little boy. And his uncle is fairly ruthless. Or maybe it's his father, uncle. Fairly ruthless, and he doesn't care for Tarkin's well-being. This monster's fighting him, and Tarkin's yelling to his uncle, and then his uncle is just saying, "Kill or be killed, you need to learn." And Tarkin gets mauled by all these monsters. He obviously escapes with his life because he's still alive, but we assume that this traumatized him a bit, and he also got all these scars, supposedly. So then we're back in the current day, and he's on the Death Star, and he's found that some of the troops on the Death Star, they're being hesitant. There was a training drill, and they weren't like firing as quickly as they should. So, he gathers all the troops, and he's going to discipline them. And he's talking to this one recruit, and he asks this recruit how many scars he has. And the recruit says 1. And Tarkin says, "Not nearly enough." And then he challenges this troop to a fight. And he rips his shirt off, and he's kind of jacked, and he's got tons of scars. He challenges this recruit to a knife fight, and he beats the shit out of this guy. However, That was a dream sequence. That is what Grand Moff Tarkin would have liked to have done. But in actuality, he's much more composed. He sort of does some vague threats to these people, but you're kind of getting a sense into Grand Moff Tarkin's sort of thought process and how he views the world and how he would like to be. So I thought that was just kind of an intriguing psychoanalysis of him. Then we have that famous scene from the initial Star Wars movie where they want to blow up Alderaan. And they're talking to Princess Leia, trying to get some information, and she gives some information, but they blow up Alderaan anyway, and that was pretty good. And then Grand Moff Tarkin, he's going back to his troops, and he chastises them because, you know, the troops were just involved in blowing up Alderaan. And some of them hesitated once again. You know, they didn't follow their orders immediately. So Tarkin, he's talking to these troops, and he's like, you know, what's wrong with you guys? Why did you hesitate? And one of the troops, you know, he was from Alderaan. That was his home planet. And he asks Tarkin, how would you feel if you were ordered to destroy your home planet? And then Tarkin says, I would do my duty with pleasure. And he chastises them for not following orders immediately, and then he fires them all out of the airlock, and a lot of them die. And I never like in movies or comics where the bad guys murder all of their own henchmen. It seems counterintuitive, but it's badass, I guess. And that's sort of how we end this issue with Tarkin sort of like contemplating his life and his choices in the last page. And I thought this was pretty good. I thought this was a pretty interesting analysis of this character we don't know that much about, really, right? And I thought the art looked really nice as well. So I had a lot of fun with this issue. I'm recommending it. Pretty good. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Next number one I'm looking at is Symbiote Spider-Man number 1, written by Peter David, art by Ivan Coelho. So this story is kind of odd because it is set in the 1984 era where Spider-Man just received the black suit after Secret Wars. So we're setting this story in a really old time frame. And the question is, like, why? Why explore this period of time? You know, does it really matter? And I guess there are going to be a few issues of this, so it's just kind of an odd choice, I felt. So let's talk about the story in this issue. Spider-Man's in the black suit, and yeah, we have Mysterio. And Mysterio, he's planning to rob a bank. He's trying to recruit a friend of his to help him. The friend doesn't want anything to do with it. Mysterio decides to end up robbing the bank himself. He pumps all this gas into the bank, and I guess it knocks everybody out. And the bank teller, this girl, she received a little note telling her to put on a mask to sort of protect her from the gas before the gas got sent into the bank. So the bank teller's not knocked out. Mysterio enters, and he asks this bank teller girl to open the vault for him. Mysterio, he's then inside the vault, and he's checking it out. He's going to steal a whole bunch of stuff. And then a security guy shows up, a security guy with a gun. And he's going to, you know, attack Mysterio. Mysterio sort of hits his hand or whatever. The security guard, he fires the gun, but it misses, and it hits that girl bank teller, and she dies. Then the police show up, and Mysterio ends up just escaping, and he doesn't manage to steal anything. And Mysterio, I guess, feels really bad about this bank teller being killed. Then we jump over to Spider-Man, and just to showcase that it is in fact set back in time, we see Spider-Man, and he's on the World Trade Center, and he's like jumping between the buildings. He's chasing down this villain named the Human Fly, and they're fighting. Spider-Man manages to succeed there. Then we also have Peter, and he's dating Felicia, aka the Black Cat. And I really like that. I really wish that Peter Parker and Felicia the Black Cat would be dating more often. I think that's an interesting thing to be explored, especially how Peter and Mary Jane aren't necessarily 100% together sometimes right now. So I would have liked him dating Black Cat a little bit more. So Black Cat and Peter, they go visit Ben Parker's grave. Peter is introducing her to his past. While they're at the cemetery,
Peter Parker sees Mysterio out of costume visiting the grave of the girl that died at the bank, and he's feeling really bad about it. And then I guess Peter followed Mysterio back to his lair or something, and Mysterio's in costume now. Spider-Man's talking to Mysterio, and he's like, I saw you at the cemetery with that girl that died. Did you rob that bank? Are you responsible? Blah, blah, blah. And they start fighting in this sort of warehouse. Mysterio he sets this explosion and it blows up, and he manages to escape in the confusion. And Spider-Man, has to go track down Mysterio another day. And that's sort of how this story ends. Overall, I didn't think that this issue was very good. I thought the artwork was just kind of average. I thought Peter David made a lot of jokes that were kind of lame and not the funniest. For example, Mysterio is robbing this bank, talking to the bank teller, and he's like, I'm your worst nightmare. And the bank teller is like, you're me? Taking a test I didn't study for, and I'm naked? It's like, that's such a lazy joke, Peter. I've heard it a million times, man. And I also felt that, why explore this era of time again? Look, it was a point in time in Spider-Man's history, and it was interesting, but it's over. It's over. We don't need to go back to it. I don't know if it's particularly compelling enough to revisit. It just goes to show that Marvel is sometimes putting out way too many books every week. Certain books certainly don't need to exist, and I think this book would be on that list. Also, just to compare it to something DC could do, what if we were to have a Batman storyline exploring the Jason Todd Robin years? That would be interesting, I guess. But do we really need to go back there and see that? I don't need to see that. Or what about during Nightfall? What if we went back to when Batman's back was broken? We explore that era again. I don't know. We don't need to. It was a point in time and it's over, and let's move on. So I don't know why Marvel decided to put out this book. It was okay. I don't think it's necessary. I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. Next comic I'm looking at is The Amazing Spider-Man, number 19, written by Nick Spencer, art by Gerardo Sandoval. This is part 3 in the Hunted storyline, which I've been really enjoying. I've also been really enjoying the tie-in issues. So last issue especially, 18. Hugh, I loved. It was my pick of the week. It was about this character, this obscure villain called the Gibbon, and he is like a half man, half ape, and he died in that issue, and it was really sad, and they're exploring that more in this issue, so I really like the interconnectivity of these tie-ins and sort of the main storyline, and I really think they are complementing each other nicely. So in this issue, we have Kraven Jr., and he's talking to his dad, and he's asking his dad, why are you letting all these rich losers have all the fun of hunting, these animal-based villains that you've rounded up? So what Kraven's been doing is he has these Kraven avatar robots, and these rich asshole hunters, wannabe hunters, they are paying for the privilege of controlling these robots and hunting these villains. And, Kraven Jr., he's making a good point here. What is Kraven Sr.'s master plan here? Why is he doing this? And that is not explored yet. Kraven Sr. just says, all will be revealed in time. We get some condolences for this Gibbon character, and the Vulture is sort of reminiscing about the Gibbon and all the good the Gibbon has done. And Spider-Man is now in the mix, and some of the villains, they want to kill Spider-Man, especially Rhino. Rhino's pissed about Spider-Man. But the Vulture, he convinces all the villains to sort of spare Spider-Man, because they have to stay together and work together, because it's us versus these Kraven robots, us versus them, so they can't be divided. They need to stay on the same side, so they all agree to work together. Black Cat, she is being held by Kraven Sr. elsewhere, and she's being held with Kurt Connor's kid. And Black Cat manages to escape the cell that she was in, and she's going to try to take Kurt Connor's kid with her. Meanwhile, Taskmaster has captured the Lizard, or Kurt Connors himself, and he's captured Kurt Connors for Arcade and Kraven. It's sort of like some sort of, I guess he's some sort of master animal-based villain for Kraven Sr.'s whole plan. Spider-Man, back in this whole Central Park thing that's going on, he runs into this villain named the Black Ant. and Black Ant was working with Taskmaster the last few issues. He's the one that gathered all these villains in the first place, and Black Ant promises to reveal the truth about this place to Spider-Man, and that is how this issue ends. And I thought this was really good as well. We are furthering along the story, pretty interesting stuff. Want to know what Kraven Sr.'s whole plan is? This is one of my favorite events in Spider-Man for the last many, many years. So I'm having a really solid time with this. And I'm going to give this issue an 8.5 out of 10. Really good stuff. Next comic I'm looking at, sticking with Spider-Man once again, is Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 5, written by Tom Taylor, art by Yildiray Cinar. So this is sort of the companion book to Amazing Spider-Man, not really tying into it, sort of doing its own thing, but sort of in the same continuity world, right? And in this issue, Aunt May has cancer. That was sort of the tease we left last issue on. And she has to get chemotherapy. And she asks Peter to show up at her appointment. And Peter's like, oh, I'm busy. Which is very out of character for Peter. Whatever, though. We're going to tie back into this later. Spider-Man, he goes on patrol. He sees the police are in a high-speed chase. Spider-Man recognizes the driver as this homeless 16-year-old kid that sort of is from the neighborhood. And Spider-Man questions this kid, and apparently he stole his mom's abusive boyfriend's car as a way to escape from them. So, Spider-Man sort of is sympathizing with this kid, but the police are still coming. They're coming to, arrest this kid, right? And Spider-Man doesn't want this kid to get in trouble, so Spider-Man tells the kid to get in the passenger seat, and Spider-Man's going to drive the car and get away from the police. So Spidey's driving the car. Eventually, he uses his webbing to sort of slingshot the car up in the air and sort of keep it hidden from the police as the police drive by. So this homeless kid that Spider-Man helped out, he's also injured. I guess something is wrong with his hand or arm or something. And he can't go to the hospital because he just stole this car. So Spidey takes him to see Doctor Strange, who's in the neighborhood. And Spidey's trying to convince Doctor Strange to help him out. We have some funny banter between the two. Doctor Strange is reluctant at first, but eventually he does. And, he helps this kid's hands out. This issue ends with Spider-Man, Peter Parker, eventually showing up to Aunt May's chemo appointment like he would have skipped it, right? Of course he's going to show up. This was a pretty wholesome issue, pretty fun. However, it was also pretty basic, pretty standard. Nothing really groundbreaking, nothing too important happened. So it's just a nice kind of filler story, but nothing too exceptional. I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10 because it was still a good time. Next comic I'm looking at is Savage Sword of Conan number 4, written by Jerry Duggan, art by Ron Garney. So this is going to be a 5-issue storyline, and we're nearing that conclusion. We have this guy, Koga Thun, this wizard or something, and he wants to kill Conan and get this map that's in Conan's head or something. And in this issue, Conan and his 2 partners he's sort of partnered up with. There's this guy, Suddy, and this girl, Menes. And this Suddy guy, he got bit by this snake from Koga Thun last issue. And this snake, the venom in it is sort of slowly taking over Suddy. So Conan, Suddy, and Menes, they're in this underground labyrinth. And they're hunting for this map. And they're fighting this undead army, these forces of Koga Thun. They're managed to fight a whole bunch of them off. But the venom in Suddy's arm sort of starts taking over him a little bit. Conan wants to decapitate Suddy's arm and sort of stop the venom from spreading. But Suddy sort of says he doesn't want to do this. And it was the wrong choice because Suddy starts being completely taken over. And Koga Thun starts being able to see through Suddy's eyes and take over his body. And Conan is eventually forced to kill this Suddy. However, Koga Thun, even through death, can take over Suddy and take over and become a zombified Suddy, and he continues to fight Conan that way. This was an okay issue. I thought it really flew by really quick. We didn't further the plot too much, although we see that this Kogathon is really this super powerful wizard. And now Kogathon and Conan and this Mayonnaise girl are really going to have to battle it out in the final issue in this series and see what the whole issue with this treasure map is. So lots of stuff set up. I think, this was sort of the bridge issue to get to the final issue. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Not too bad. Not the greatest, but I'm excited for the conclusion that's going to be coming up. Jumping over to DC now, next book I'm looking at is The Batman Who Laughs, number 4, written by Scott Snyder, art by Jock. This is a very interesting story. The stakes are so high. I've never felt that Batman was on the verge of losing and dying as much as I do in this story. So that is some pretty epic stuff here. Diving into this issue, you have Batman, and he's slowly being taken over by this Batman Who Laughs virus and slowly turning into the Joker. Meanwhile, this whole Batman Who Laughs and this Grim Knight Batman from this Dark Knight's Metal universe, they are sort of like trying to take over the world or something. So Batman's turning into the Batman Who Laughs. He gets into an argument with Alfred, and it gets really heated to the point where they're both punching each other in the face, and they are trading punches. Eventually, Bruce manages to come to his senses and not act so crazy, and sort of like him and Alfred start like crying and sort of start, coming together a little bit after this heated moment. Batman later on goes and talks to the Joker, the normal Joker, and they almost bond here. And what's interesting is that Scott Snyder is really trying to sort of analyze this whole Batman and Joker relationship and what it all really means. So just to read some of their interaction here, Joker says to Batman, "You and I will always be at war. You think we matter? I think life's a bad fucking joke. I believe that one day I'll win, and that I'll watch you scream at my feet as this city dies, and on that day I will laugh at you. But just once and never again, here and now, I want you to know that's not what I want." So what Joker's saying here is that, in the end, he thinks that one day the Joker is in fact going to win. But that's not his end goal. So then Batman is like, "So what then? You want me to win?" And then Joker's like, No. What I want is I want neither of us to win ever. And I guess what the Joker's trying to say here is that he really, in the end, he just wants it to never end. He loves his sort of fighting with Batman, and he just wants that to go on forever. He doesn't want either person to win. He wants it to never end. And I thought that was a pretty interesting psychoanalysis of the Joker and Batman's relationship here by Scott Snyder. I thought that was pretty good stuff. Also, what's interesting here is that almost in a way of friendship bonding between these two, Batman says, "Look, I'm turning into this Batman who laughs thing here, and if I ever turn into him, I want you to kill me." And the Joker says, "Oh, I'll kill you." And that's sort of how this little confrontation with the Joker ends here. Great stuff here. So then Batman goes to Blackgate Prison, and this is where it gets kind of confusing. So we got Batman, we got the Batman Who Laughs, we got Gordon, we got Bruce Wayne from an alternate universe who is the warden of Blackgate Prison, and we're in the main DC universe, and then we're in an alternate universe where Blackgate Prison is much bigger, and we're sort of jumping universes, and it's really confusing. And then there's all these prison guards, and they start shooting Batman firing squad style, and that's sort of how this issue ends. So is Batman gonna die here? I don't know, right? So what did I think of this issue? I am kind of mixed on it. I really liked some of the psychoanalysis going on here. I really think the stakes are super high. It seems like Batman's not going to make it out of this. However, I was also many times very confused about what was happening, and that kind of ruined the story a little bit for me. But, I'm still digging it, and I'm still very excited to see this to its conclusion. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10. Sticking with Batman now, next book I'm looking at is Batman 68, written by Tom King, art by Amanda Connor. So we are still in Tom King's
Batman Dream World, this whole nightmare storyline that's been going on forever and everybody wants to be over and it's going on way too long. And in this issue, it's taking place before Batman and Catwoman's failed wedding ceremony. So we're going back in time here, and Tom King wanted to set the story, a few months ago before that whole wedding ceremony went down. And we have Lois and Selena Kyle, and they are having a bachelorette party in a way, and they are hanging out in the Fortress of Solitude. They are drinking various wines. And these are wines that Superman has received as gifts over the years from various countries, various galaxies, all over the universe. So they're having a fun time drinking all this weird stuff. They also spend some time in this thing called the Body Bliss Hot Tub, which apparently Brainiac built this thing to trap Superman in it once. It's like this hot tub that when you get in, you just feel so good, you'll never want to leave. So I guess Brainiac was hoping that Superman would get in this hot tub and just be stuck there forever because it'd be so orgasmic, he would just never get out of it. I don't know. It's kind of a funny concept, I guess. Then Lois and Selena try on various Superman outfits. And I guess Superman has these cyborg Superman butlers or something, and they're just there and hanging out and assisting with whatever Lois and Selena want. And I guess they start stripping maybe for their amusement or something. I don't know. Overall, though, I liked this portion of the comic and thought it was pretty fun. However, if this is a dream of Batman, why are we getting so much story from Lois and Selena's perspective? How would Bruce Wayne even know that this was happening? Moving on, though, Clark and Bruce are having their sort of bachelor party, and it's super awkward. Clark is written as if he's like this socially awkward farm boy still who's very intimidated by the wealth of Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne is written as this super serious guy that just cannot relax for 1 second, constantly focused on being Batman. And they have this like very awkward night. They're awkwardly talking about soup like they have nothing to say to each other. They start looking at old paintings of Bruce's family. And the whole time it's like they just can't be friends and they don't know what to say to each other. Eventually they start playing chess. Now Clark, he tries to psychoanalyze Batman or psychoanalyze Bruce Wayne, and he says, I love being Superman, but I hate that I have to be Superman. Whereas you hate being Batman, but you love that you have to be Batman. And I guess this is somewhat interesting. I guess there's some somewhat truth to this characterization, but I don't know. Eventually, Lois and Selena and Bruce and Clark all come back together after their whole separate parties, and they sort of are all friends and reminiscing about this whole moment. And this issue ends where Batman is on this table being pumped full of drugs to keep him docile. So that is what is happening in the real world and not in this whole dream world he is stuck in. So I didn't really like this issue that much. I'm mixed on it. Part of it was fun. I think it's my favorite of the Nightmare storyline, but I still have kind of lots of problems with it. I feel that Clark and Bruce's characterization was not what I really want. I don't want Bruce and Clark to be so awkward with one another, and I just don't buy into the way Tom King was writing both of them. I liked Selena and Lois's interaction, though. But I still feel that while this issue did have a couple of fun moments here, we don't need this Nightmare storyline to go on. Like, it feels like Tom King is just kind of wasting time. It's just like, let's get on with it. Let's get on with the real story, man. Anyway, I'm going to give this issue a 6 out of 10. Next comic I'm looking at is Detective Comics 1001, written by Peter J. Tomasi, art by Brad Walker. So we had the epic and really long issue 1000 celebrating all that history of Batman. You can check out my video on that if you have not seen it. I break down that entire issue in depth. And now we are getting on with Peter Tomasi's sort of story and what he wants to explore. We're being introduced to this Arkham Knight character and seeing what his whole deal is. So when this issue opens up, The Arkham Knight, he is leading some sort of weird cult or something, and they are up to some sort of shenanigans. Meanwhile, Gordon and Batman, they are investigating all these dead bats in Gotham City. So Batman goes to visit Kurt Langstrom, aka Man-Bat, and sort of see if he can help with the situation. But he's away, though. I think they explain that he's away doing whatever they're doing in Justice League Dark. So, but his wife Francine is there, and she starts going crazy or something, and she injects herself with something that turns her into a woman Man-Bat, man-woman-bat, whatever. And Batman starts fighting her. They start sort of fighting throughout the streets and cityscape of Gotham City. Batman's like riding her through several rooftops. He eventually sort of subdues her. Then all of a sudden, a big, powerful light shines into the sky, and it was created by the Arkham Knight and his whole weird cult. Batman goes to check it out, and he's attacked by the Arkham Knight's army, and this issue ends with Batman sort of being subdued by their whole group. They're like really powerful, and Batman is sort of like on the ground, and it looks like he's been defeated in a way. I thought this was okay. Lots of mystery, lots of setting stuff up for future issues. The artwork was nice. I'm not too sucked into the story yet and what the deal with this Arkham Knight is, but it was not bad. Not bad. I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. Next comic I'm looking at is Catwoman number 10, written by Jolie Jones, art by Fernando Blanco. So last issue, Jolie Jones took a break or something and was like a fill-in writer, and now she's back, and we're sort of getting back to the overall story that she is telling. I really kind of dug this series in the beginning, and now I'm starting to get kind of mixed on issues. One issue will be pretty good, one will be less good, and yeah, let's dive into the story in this issue. So the artwork continues to be pretty fantastic. I'm really digging the art style in this. But it's kind of a disjointed narrative. We're jumping in time a lot, telling a lot of things out of order. We start this issue out, and there's this heist, and it's already on the way, and they're sort of like being chased, this high-speed car chase. Then we jump back in time a bit, and we're at this auction house, and they're introducing this item that they're eventually going to rob, and it's this ancient mask from the 1500s, and it's worth maybe $1 to $2 million. Then we jump back in time a little bit further even, and we have Penguin and Catwoman. They're having this whole interaction because Penguin hired Catwoman to steal this holy relic for him, and Catwoman stole it, and Selina's threatening to smash it, but they work out some deal where she'll keep the relic base and Penguin will keep this jewel thingy that he really wants. And I guess we have to read this Red Hood book to find out what Penguin wants with this jewel thing, which I don't really want to do. I want to know what the deal with the jewel thing is, but I don't want to pick up the Red Hood book. Anyway, then we have like a super short scene with cameos from Raymond Creel, who is this guy running for mayor, and then we see his mother with a messed up face in the back of this limo. So they just kind of like, they don't really have anything to do with this particular issue, but they're just showing you these characters so you don't forget about them, because they're sort of the main characters of this whole Catwoman run, and I guess they're going to tie back into them later, but they were really kind of just shoved in this issue for no reason. And then, going back in time a little bit more, Selina meets this guy named James, and they are meeting in this issue, and I guess they're going to eventually rob this whole thing and pull off this whole heist that we saw in the beginning of the issue. So then we're jumping back to the beginning of the issue where that heist was happening, and we're picking up there. And this issue was kind of all over the place. My big criticism is that narrative that just keeps going all over the place, and they're shoehorning a lot of stuff in, and I don't know, not the best issue of Catwoman, but it's going to be interesting to see how this run plays out overall, and what we're going to get in the end, what the deal with the heist is, what the deal with this Creel family is, and this woman with the messed up face, and seeing all that. But this was definitely a weaker issue for sure. Superman number 10, written by Brian Michael Bendis, art by Ivan Rice. So we are continuing to learn about Superboy's adventures with his space grandpa, Jor-El, and what the whole deal with that was, and how he got lost in Earth 3, the crime syndicate's universe. So Superboy's continuing his story.
He was on the crime syndicate planet, and evil Lois Lane, evil version of his mother, was attacking him and, trying to kill him. And then eventually, Space Grandpa Jor-El shows up and saves Jonathan. And Jor-El manages to escape with John, and I guess they're back on his spaceship. And Jor-El, he is very kind of upset, and apparently he's been looking for years for Jonathan. Years. Jonathan wasn't on this crime syndicate planet as long as that, but to Jor-El, it's been years. So Jor-El's explaining that the reason it took so long is that he was trying to figure out this whole black hole situation and figure out how he could, where John went. And eventually he managed to go into the black hole and get John safely out. But it took a while, right? And on their way back to Earth, finally, they get attacked by this Rogel Czar who has apparently escaped from the Phantom Zone somehow on his own. So shit is going down in space, lots of battling going on, and Jor-El is still up there fighting them. However, John went back to Earth, and he was talking with Superman on Earth and explaining this whole story. And finally, after hearing the whole story, Superman is like, well, I guess we need to suit up and go up there and help with that whole kind of situation with Rogel Czar, and they do so, and that is how this issue ends. Overall, I thought this issue was okay. I'm glad we finally got the explanation of what was going on with John Kent, and his whole adventures with Space Grandpa and the crime syndicate, and that whole story is wrapped up. I think I would have liked a little bit more of the crime syndicate, but that's okay that we're done with that. And I don't love Rogel Czar, but that was still a lingering plot thread, so I'm glad that Bendis is going to, sort of deal with that next issue or so. And we're going to get maybe some sort of epic space battle or something, so that could be pretty fun. I'm very excited for this whole Jor-El storyline to be over and explained, and I wonder how Bendis is going to leave that. Are we going to sort of retcon Jor-El being alive again and sort of figure that out, or what's going to happen there? I'm very, very curious. So I'm not 100% on board with all the stuff Bendis is doing here, but I'm always intrigued by it. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. The last book I'm looking at this week is Prodigy number 5, written by Mark Miller, art by Raphael Albuquerque. This is the penultimate issue. There's going to be one more in this series, and stuff is kind of escalating a bit. So for those of you who haven't been reading this, it's about this guy Edison Crane, and he is like this super smart guy, and he's amazing at everything. He has some sort of crazy abilities to just absorb information. And in this issue, we start off, and Edison Crane, he is fighting off these hordes of terrorists in Damascus as he battles to uncover the dark secrets of these ancient runes. So he's in these catacombs or something, and he is looking at all these walls, and he is absorbing and memorizing all the inscriptions carved in this temple. And these bombers are coming to raze the city to the ground. He's fighting through everybody. His teammates are on a plane, and they're sort of flying in to save him. And he's talking to them on like a microphone on his ear. And somehow he just knows exactly where they are, and he tells them to start flying the plane at a 45-degree angle. He jumps out of this window, grabs onto the bottom of the plane, and gets safely flown away, and all the terrorists get bombed. So, that's amazing that he was able to pull this off, right? I love the craziness that this Edison guy can pull off here. So, Edison Crane, he's injured, though. He got stabbed or shot or something, and he needs surgery. He's taken to this hospital. But, Edison, he so expects to do everything himself in his entire life because he's the best at everything, right? He's at the hospital, and he asks for 3 mirrors and a scalpel. He's going to do this surgery he needs on himself. But eventually he passes out and goes into cardiac arrest. So the surgeons actually have to do the surgery on them himself. And Edison eventually comes through, and he was saved, and the surgery was successful. And I think this was sort of an interesting change of pace, that for once Edison Crane had to actually rely on other people outside of him and put his trust in other people to do a good job. And they did. So I liked that. So Edison, apparently, he bought this hospital after that. I guess he was so impressed or something. or maybe he just really wanted a notepad for his thoughts, because he takes out like a Sharpie and he starts writing all the secrets that he saw in these ancient runes, and he writes them on the walls of his hospital, and he's decoding them. And he starts figuring out the whole threat coming to Earth. And then, it's this alternate dimension, and they're attacking Earth. And apparently on their home planet, their home dimension, they've used up all their resources, and they're looking to move to this Earth and, use up all this Earth's resources. They need to build a bridge to connect both of the worlds. And the bridge is located on the French-Swiss border in a place called the Large Hadron Collider. So Edison figures all this out, and he's telling it all to his new partner, this blonde woman that we've seen them build this friendship over the last few issues. And she double crosses him. She shoots him, and now that he's figured out all this information, I guess she has all the stuff that she and this whole evil organization needs. And she's been working with the bad guys all along, and that is sort of the twist ending of this issue. And I thought this was pretty fun. It's always ridiculous what this Edison guy can do. We are furthering along the story, and I'm very excited for the final issue to see how it's all going to come down. I do think, though, that they've been teasing this alternate world since the story began, and we haven't really explored that much of it. And now we're only going to have one final issue to sort of wrap up that whole stuff. But nevertheless, I always have a lot of fun reading this book. And I like the twist with the girl being evil, and I want to see how that is explained and goes further. So yeah, really good stuff. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10. That is all the books I had time to review this week. If you like this video, like it, subscribe if you have not. Check out some of my other videos, and in the comments, let me know what opinions you agree or disagree with, or what other books you've been reading that I should perhaps check out.